Hi everyone, this is episode 5 of my Metroidvania series, and it's actually talking about something that's related to my Metroidvania research, but not specifically Metroidvania itself. And essentially what happened is I recently released my 2025 Metroidvania Corpus, but I forgot to mention or talk about speedrunning insofar as I continued my research into Metroidvania, I moved further and further away from speedrunning. And I never actually explain in the corpus why that is. And it's also something that happened after I started writing my book series, so I didn't really have time to ever sit down and think about, okay, why is this happening? So the point of this particular piece was to discuss that thing that I had left out. So it basically talks about, okay, why did I walk away from speedrunning while continuing to research Metroidvania, which is very conducive to speedrunning. Hence the title, Those Who Walk Away from Speedrunning, a Trans Woman's Experiences Researching and Abuse Suffered from the Speedrunning Community. So this episode of my YouTube Metroidvania series is going to talk about that in particular, and this piece also comes with an additional historical component, so I'll just be reading this from top to bottom, and it includes the stuff that I wrote today, but also that older piece as well. It'll be about half an hour long, probably, maybe a little older. Yeah, without further ado, let's get started. A short addendum to my 2025 Metroidvania Corpus, addressing why speedrunning, although still important to my work, is something I, a trans woman and com, ultimately walked away from, while keeping my interest for Metroidvania, vis-à-vis ludo-Gothic BDSM, largely intact, e.g., my abuse and alienation suffered at the hands of the shooter community versus the good treatment I received from Metroid speedrunners. In light of recent compiling and releasing my entire Metroidvania research as one giant document, re. debut for Persephone's 2025 Metroidvania Corpus, hindsight denotes a strange and glaring omission, my exit from speedrunning research as a whole. As such, I wanted to quickly address how speedrunning, while still important to me and making up the bulk of my early research, gradually became less important to me as time went on. Lasting from 2017 until 2021, before abandoning pure game theory in favor of a more holistic practice, and one that combined ludology and games journalism with Marxism, gender studies, and Gothic praxis, Gothic, gay, anarcho-communism, the focus of my current book series and its ongoing holistic research. Originally, speedrunners were the center of my world, but eventually, along with academia at large, became my omelus to walk away from. Silence is golden, silence is genocide, and my desire to talk about my past isn't simply to clear the air, find closure, but document my past work as part of a larger ongoing project. Note, this piece involves an essay that I originally wrote for Marilyn Roxy on their now-defunct blog, Video Hookups, Postcolonialism, and Doom. I have decided to republish that article here as a matter of historical record. It will be included here, but after my written historical accounts on speedrunning. Rome wasn't burned in a day. While I can't speak for everyone here, I also think it's fair to say that most people's big life decisions aren't made in a split second, like moving away from speedrunning just by dedicating years of research to it. Doing so wasn't a decision I made lightly or at the drop of a hat. It took time and evolved into itself from external social pressures. These partially involved my romantic escapades, gradually and painfully opening my eyes to increasingly radical politics, which is what my book series ultimately became. But it also involved people I didn't personally know but worked with in forming my decisions, including my decision to come out of the closet. In a sense, that breakthrough was made after smaller but no less important rebellions early on. As I radicalized, my work changed. As my work changed, so did my social groups and work contexts. As those changed, so did I radicalize more, etc. Metroidvania stayed a part of my coming out, future portfolio, and comprises over 25% of my PhD arguments on Gothic poetics and ludo-Gothic BDSM. Speedrunning, specifically that of the shooter community, did not. How can this be? You ask. In a nutshell, because Metroidvania were good to me, and speedrunning, especially shooters, largely weren't. And similar to my mistreatment and gradual boil-the-frog excommunication from academia, my alienation from the speedrunning world by its practitioners encouraged my proverbial walking away from that obelisk too. I treated like a Martian who, once exposed, couldn't go back into the closet, and likewise wouldn't be accepted by Tolkien marginalized groups. The process is often called trans-emasculation. I eventually got my ass to Mars and made friends of a similar disposition and class character when in Rome, or on the island of misfit toys, more like. To be frank, my research stopped leaning into speedrunning, partly because of other people's abusive behavior towards me, and that includes within the larger speedrunning community itself. For a while, I focused on speedrunning extensively and interviewed lots of different speedrunners, but the moment my larger politics started to seep into my work, 2020, with postcolonialism and doom, but also no girls or trans people allowed, and my Iron Fury critique, zombie police states, above, in 2021, my contacts dried up, and any future interviews I had were quietly dropped. In short, I was blacklisted and segregated, and had to decide what to do next. Furthermore, this didn't just affect my video game interviews, but also my heavy metal interviews, 2 Cents Guy becoming 2 Cents Girl, which almost no one respected or stuck with, my 2 cents, an interview with Andy Carrate. And while abuse certainly played a part regarding my shift in researching focus, my pause in actual interviews wasn't caused by exile alone. While I'd been interviewing people since 2019, Alien or Q&A Project Interview Compendium, my series of interviews stopped in 2021 for several reasons. Partly I stopped because certain bad actors in the shooter community started to reject me, Hellblazer's Doom Eternal Speedrunning Q&A Interview Compendium. That being said, the Metroidvania community was actually really cool about things, Mazes and Labyrinths Q&A Interview Compendium 2021. So my criticism towards shooter speedrunners, players, doesn't concern them. Certain, in regards to bad actors being the key word here, some runners like Cynic the Original and Kingdom were perfectly fine. Furthermore, I don't want to arbitrarily point fingers here, but instead address how my overall treatment and circumstances made me feel, which is to some degree subjective and relative to other things that were happening in my life at the time. Apart from abuse, another reason I stopped was quantity. I eventually acquired the amount of research I would need to proceed writing about Metroidvania, which I gradually prioritized over shooters during my PhD work, i.e., to embark on the book writing side of my research. In other words, conducting these interviews was time-consuming and planning-intensive, and I didn't want to do any more of it than I absolutely had to. Coupled with the frustrations and hang-ups that did take place, I drew a line and stuck to it. The thing is, I wasn't actively investigating anyone for anything. I was primarily focused on the games being played and wrote about them because it interested me, and yet, while I wasn't consciously doing an activism, in reality, that's exactly what I was doing. Furthermore, once my views were out in plain sight, the people I had previously worked with started treating me like a threat, i.e., someone who might investigate them for things they had done, views they privately or not so privately held. In very Gamergate fashion, they started to treat me like a muckraker. I lost interviews not just with Richard Gobel, whose game I had enjoyed playing, re 80s Popcorn Love, an Iron Fury review, but not its in-game readme, and who had experienced repeated scandals about his game containing sexist elements, see footnote, but also Nick Newhart from Monolith Productions, whose interview was prepped and ready to go before he ghosted me, and John Romero, who initially expressed interest through his wife before backing off. The receipts for Newhart and Romero's wife got lost in the shuffle, I'm afraid. Google recently put a cap on my data, and despite being an alumnus, through my school email, and in trying to free up space by mass deleting junk mail, I accidentally deleted non-junk mail too. This being said, I still have the Q&A I wrote for Newhart to respond to, Swords Vintage to Retro, and FES Q&A series Nick Newhart, June 8, 2021. I wrote it and reached out to him after watching Civi's 2019 Blood retrospective, Pro Blood No. 1, and even trying to get an academic journal about Civi and Blood published, re Survival Horror and Blood, the Weaponized Affect of the Gothic FPS. I was not successful in the latter half, but Newhart did agree to do the interview and wasn't above having them, given Blood's then recent Night Dive remaster sparking fresh interest, e.g. his YouTube interview with Ragnar Rocks, Blood, full interview with Nick Newhart, 2020. Newhart accepted the Q&A and then stopped responding after I sent him the questions. Dick move. Abuse is often unspoken, and during and after its occurrence invariably requires some degree of speculation to articulate. To that, it wasn't even that I had disagreed with these people that led to their cold shoulders, but how I did it. They were interested in being challenged in ways that didn't upset their pre-held political beliefs, or prevent them from jousting in ways they deemed acceptable, e.g. your mate Devo agreeing with me initially about Under the Mail, only to walk back his statements the moment I rocked the boat, by critiquing it themselves and anyone supporting them to an uncritical degree. It was more of a careful distancing or neglect in many of these cases, or Mayo straight up asking me to stop tagging him after critiquing his videos too many times. Source tweet, Under the Mayo, March 24th, 2021. But in other cases from the same community these persons belonged, the hate was much more outspoken and pronounced, e.g. the comments to No Girls having some constructive moments, but many more being pointlessly aggressive, hateful, and bigoted, all to defend their territory from my arguments, many of the commenters being anonymous, but others coming from trans people when I was still in the closet. Microaggression, or flat-out aggression, is still aggression, and acting indifferent during a witch hunt is, unto itself, a form of passive aggression. By extension, all of these people, white, straight, male gamers by and large, wanted to advertise their own politics, i.e. through media that was worshipped in service to profit, not critically dissected and analyzed, and they certainly weren't quiet about that. Again, it was very Gamergate, and in the absence of any kind of smoking gun against me, not that anyone investigating Anita Sarkeesian ever found anything substantial against her. Most just iced me out, severed all ties. For them, Sarkeesian's idea was impossible, or the completely true but widely hated idea that it is both possible and indeed necessary to enjoy something and still critique its pernicious and problematic elements. White male fragility at work, they saw me as a threat that would expose them, advertently or not, so they acted how privileged people, namely white moderates, so often do, grudgingly and indirectly, while the dog pile ran its course. I still get a comment every so often about that review. Worse, and something I didn't realize until I came out of the closet in August 2022, but everything that was happening to me at that point was transphobic, i.e., everything my review for Doom Eternal discussed about gender trouble was being applied to me without me knowing. The closet sucks. Left with no alternative, and feeling deeply uncomfortable with the idea of asking my former contacts why I suddenly was alien to them, I wrote to some, none replied. I started to try and understand why through my work. I shifted away from objectively analyzing speedrunners, who to this day are primarily white straight men, and began to see them through a dialectical material lens, as status quo men, monetizing and monopolizing their craft to defend capital with, in some shape or form. This wasn't an immediate realization, nor restricted entirely online, but one that started as much with domestic abuse at home, post-grad work during COVID, as it did with public exile, e.g. military optimism, which belonged originally to a now discontinued book whose chapter I absorbed into my sex positivity book series, Neoliberalism in Yesterday's Heroes. My life was a bit of a mess when I wrote Yesterday's Heroes. For starters, my second ex had left me without warning in September 2019, going on to marry a secret flame in England. Coupled with that, I was both coming out of the closet at the time, being dogpiled for my Doom Eternal review, and dealing with COVID academic rejections, RE survival horror, as well as suffering the abuse of my then third partner while living in Florida with them. See Escaping Jadis or Running Up That Hill 2024. In regards to all of that, Yesterday's Heroes represented several things. One, the initial articles that got me in trouble with the shooter community, but also my own digesting of Judith Butler's gender trouble while living with a TERF swerve for several years, i.e. the TERF movement was kicking off in 2017, post-Gamergate 2014, and basically my writing going from the kind of inoffensive I like sex, heavy metal, and video games, blog writing, RE sex, metal, and video games 2021, and indifferent, socially inert game studies, RE mazes and labyrinths 2021, turned into something altogether more holistic, empathetic, and politically active. At first, my de facto rivals couldn't stand it, i.e. sex was gross, unless it was sold to them, and reflected the nuclear model they were currently worshipping through Doom and similar monomythic fiction, but I kept at it, and here we are. If asked, my critics might describe me as some automatic whistleblower who, in 2020, was actively gunning for them and everything they hold dear. I'll get you and your little dog too. But in reality, I was just following my nose on the trail of things they didn't want investigated, save to aggrandize them and validate their pre-existing status quo views, and whose nose had always been meticulous, but in which grad school had honed while reinvigorating my blog writing to lend a more critical viewpoint. In turn, I think the larger social body I was dealing with ultimately decided against my views, i.e. they pulled away because I was a lost cause, thus wouldn't stop growing into what they said I was before I had even come out. In some ways, I was oblivious to my own queerness until suddenly I wasn't, but others with a nose for it, even bigoted bloodhounds punching down at me, spotted it much sooner, and yet the oil-to-water treatment only pushed me to keep digging and to get to the bottom of things, i.e. the criticism, but especially the nastier criticism without empathy or merit, ultimately drove me to change. The core problem with journalism and activism lies in trying to investigate cops, de facto or otherwise, i.e. those who very much want power, but don't want anyone looking into how they got it or what it stands for. So I very quickly found myself working in the dark, chasing ideas attached to a system that seemed, through the people manning its walls, to be defending itself, by simultaneously maintaining and reinforcing its boundaries, while also concealing and expanding them. RE, gaslight, gatekeep, girlboss. I wouldn't tokenize, and I was too principled and meticulous to stop or curb what I was doing, and so they left me to my devices, wherein I continued my research on speedrunning and video games, shaken but determined to complete things. In truth, I had survived much worse. This brings us to my changing of opinions about speedrunning. Originally, I veered away from just Doom Eternal, RE spectating FPS speedruns, potential pitfalls exemplified by Doom Eternal, and delved into speedrunning as a more peripheral case of study. As time went on, I barely focused on speedrunning at all, instead fixating on sex worker liberation through iconoclastic art, and using my interest in Metroidvania to develop that vis-à-vis ludo-Gothic BDSM. It wasn't a subject my old research area had much to offer an opinion on. Eventually, I had to draw my own conclusions. So I did, releasing my PhD in 2023 as the first in an ongoing book series called Sex Positivity, whose original outdated manifesto I started writing in July 2023. As time went on, I gradually found myself writing more and more about speedrunning, but always in small pieces, usually once or twice per book below. My findings about speedrunning in particular boil down as follows, i.e. starting after the Cold War ended in the early 90s, but built up to and evolving into something that took decades to prepare and materialize, RE from my Volume 1. Quote, Power is a performance that upholds to the perception of impossible things like total control, endless enemies, ultimate strength, or absolute victory through kayfabe reversals. The same goes for containment, whose paradox of total imprisonment our thesis discussed in relation to video games as breakable, i.e., how speedrunning and spoil sport gaming attitudes normally contain tremendous invention that canonically restrict the development and execution of emergent puzzle solving to single text in gaming culture. First is applying that mentality to reconfigure larger extra-textual structures, e.g. Coincidences, Doom Strategy Guide, Akuplox Mancubus Cliff, treating player invention more as a hobby on par with a Rubik's Cube, or hell, a human being beating Tetris for the first time in its 38-year existence. Game Scouts, after 34 years, someone finally beat Tetris. Versus escaping capitalist realism by playing video games and other such experiments in ways that resist the profit motive within the neoliberal era, with organized speedrunning arguably having started in 1990, just before the fall of the Soviet Union. The puzzle is ostensibly impressive, but the much-touted progress of solving it becomes an empty gesture insofar as liberating worker minds is concerned. Doing so has no effect on the external world unless the attitude for solving complicated puzzles through emergent gameplay is deliberately taken outside of the text. Otherwise, the hauntology and its cancelled future are entirely self-contained. In truth, the degree of conscious unity against grander historical material problems can be applied to capital through rebellious worker action, and ludo-Gothic BDSM poetics across all mediums and labor forms, e.g. speedrunning, which can work from my thesis volume, quote, as a communal effect for solving complex puzzles and telling Gothic little narratives in highly inventive ways. As we'll see moving forwards, this strategy isn't just limited to video games, but applies to any poetic endeavor during oppositional praxis, unquote, i.e., intersectional multi-layered strategies of resistance and in misdirection that strive to demonstrate there is no outside of the text, applying the imagination and effort needed to transform the world around us by any and all means necessary. To that, I think the grassroots culture and nonprofit approach to speedrunning allows larger groups of people to solve immensely difficult problems collectively outside of established business practices, thwarting capitalist realism by weaponizing the collective ingenuity and incredible puzzle-solving power of speedrunning against the elite. If popular video games franchised under neoliberal capitalism and organized speedrunning began to form right before the end of the Cold War in 1990, then its proletarian utility and other such revolutionary strategies overlapping within nerd culture must do so after the end of history's cultural myopia began to thicken. At first I considered the idea of practical application, i.e., if you can beat Tetris, you can develop communism. I followed this idea with a more biting critique of gamers, re from my poetry module, quote, regarding video games as a neoliberal form of dogma from the early 80s to the end of the Cold War and beyond. You went from public entertainment devices, arcades that had a bunch of mostly young male clients cycling through them like a pimped-out sex worker, to the 1983 Atari crash and subsequent 1985 smash hit success of Nintendo Super Mario Bros., encouraging the widespread sale of video games in the usual Gothic haunt among the middle class. Except this time the elite wanted in through ways that didn't exist during the neo-Gothic revival, televisions as personal property that could funnel in their burgeoning ideology through the disguise of expensive and highly recursive games. From the early days of Space Invaders, Pac-Man or Donkey Kong, to Mario, then about 7 years, 12 if you start from 1973, when the elite began their first experiments with neoliberalism in South America, the usual place of neoliberal business and indoctrination transitioned from single arcade machines to larger amounts of money, from quarters to hundreds of dollars per customer in each household, where there is more money to be had, and seasonally at that, i.e., a Stepford wife purchased for paychecks, not pocket change, and ready to implement the business model into the first generation of what would become the new world order under neoliberal capitalism. A world of us versus them enforced by neoliberal monomythic propaganda's harmful simulations of Amazonimachia to maintain the status quo at a socio-material level, re the shadows of a new republic's man cave walls. In turn, the American middle class, so-called gamer culture, would gatekeep and safeguard the elite through video games being an acclimating device to neo-feudal territories to defend in reality, outside of the game worlds themselves, as capital starts to decay, like usual. Meanwhile, the companies making these games have progressively privatized and digitized them to such a degree as to make it easier to pick the pockets of said middle class, leaving them brainwashed, broke, and looking for someone to blame, all while being routinely desensitized to us versus them violence against a flexible scapegoat refrain, i.e. extending from some combination of open to closed space across numerous themes and genres, from mazes and labyrinths, out of novels and into cinema and Metroidvania. Any counterattack should go beyond something to reference from older works into new ones. Mine are considerable, populous, and consistently sex-positive, reclaiming the likes of Castlevania and Metroid to say something iconoclastic with them, versus merely compiling them as Parrish largely does, i.e. he spends a lot more time compiling all the games that simply exist, instead of making thesis statements that apply to multiple games. Unquote. Source, Modularity and Class, 2024. In doing so, I was effectively examining the people who had bullied me in the past, i.e. the same group of people the market always privileges and protects, minus token cops, who go to bat for them, corporations, on and off stage. To summarize, as the state enters crisis during its boom and bust cycle, it needs defenders. Entering the neoliberal age of video games, the state now had a wide group of young to middle-aged men that could turn against social activism, loud and proud gamers, who would defend neo-feudal regressions through the same monolithic dogma in their games, but existing between said games and the nostalgic real-world spaces of nuclear home. They would defend for themselves against capital's enemies. And while my writing was largely critiquing gamer culture at large, speedrunners effectively embody a small, myopic, and self-centered subset of that. Their documentarians also speedrun games, e.g. Summoning Salt, whose 4-2, The History of Super Mario Bros. Most Infamous Level, 2018, was the first speedrunning documentary I ever watched, and synergistically make videos monetizing their own aggrandizement, i.e. conquering games, and each other's records for fortune and fame. And while they're entirely within their rights to do whatever they want, the fact remains their emergent play has notably stayed in text, i.e. solving puzzles that have no real-world application, save turning outside-the-box thinking into a business for men and Tolkien parties, and marrying them to the unsavory practices of people like Caleb Hart being a transphobe, an all-around bigot, piece of shit, or Karl Jobst hiding his own sordid past as a practicing pickup artist and friend to neo-Nazis. Openly gay and disillusioned, I slowly, then all at once, found myself alone, puzzling over something I had de-romanticized. In short, I began to muckrake, feeling a need to do so, given how few people were investigating streamers then or now. The aforementioned documentarians don't tend to investigate themselves, i.e. Karl Jobst. Originally, sex positivity started as an outlet to examine turfs and sex pests in the wider world of popular media, video games included, i.e. gamers like Caleb and Karl being similar to those who'd bullied me turned a blind eye during my research into gaming streamers. This isn't why I interviewed the streamers I did at the time, but several years after dealing with them and starting my book series in earnest, my past run-ins informed my current activism being not my first rodeo. First, I wrote Volume 3 initially on my blog before taking it down, i.e. because I wanted to hammer down the story, or the theory side of things. From there, I wrote Volume 0, followed by 3 going on 4 additional books, Volumes 1, 2 Part 1, and 2 Part 2's Undead and Demon modules. And now, after 5 years and 5 books, I've returned to think about the community I walked away from in hindsight, i.e. now that I'll shortly be re-releasing Volume 3, which talks about bigotry in the streaming community at large. A retrospective like this one seems incredibly salient. My time, as they say, has come. To be clear, speedrunning as a whole still has value, but the primary focus of my work has long since shifted away from it in any objective, non-activist sense. Outside of Plato's cave, I now see those inside it as deliberately obtuse, making money while the world burns, genocide happens at home and overseas, and fascism affects everyone immediately but them. I still watch speedruns sometimes, mostly Super Metroid because that's my favorite game, but it doesn't have the same magic for me that it once did. I can enjoy it, but generally when watching people who didn't abuse me from a distance, For example, it's been fun to watch Shiny Zenny, someone I interviewed in the past, R8 Mazes and Labyrinths, Speedrunning Metroidvania Shiny Zenny 2021, chase the any percent world record, even though I A, know the company he keeps, R8 Oats and Goats, who has vocally apologized for Caleb Hart's bigotry in the past, and B, suspect our political beliefs are radically different. He's not obnoxious about them, doesn't antagonize me for having cooties. Also, the crowd in the above photo demonstrates the speedrunning demographic as a whole. So, in the rare moments that I even get the urge to watch a speedrun again, I can just quietly drop into Zenny's chat, lurk for a bit, and leave again. It's not a world for which I'm openly welcome, however much I want to be, so I don't fight for where I'm not wanted. I have my own friends and causes to fight for, while speedrunning as a whole still hovers in the background, like the ghost warriors from Return of the Jedi. To be crystal clear about this, I don't hate general speedrunning at all, and I don't wish the larger community any harm or ill will. Indeed, I go on to write in my book series, from Volume 3, I don't wish to discourage the enjoyment of video games or speedrunning. Playing video games and enjoying speedrunning is perfectly fine, but I still agree with Anita Sarkeesian and marry her idea to Jesper Juul's own theories and my own Gothic communist approach to proletarian praxis. To it, we just drifted apart over time, thanks to some bad actors, and those actors I will absolutely critique to my heart's desire, especially if it bothers them. If you prick a gamer bro, a fascist bleeds. I also don't feel sick of the enterprise at large, don't feel like James Rolfe telling Jason Voorhees, kill me, after being threatened with more Friday the 13th for the NES. For me, speedrunning is like an old love that, while I still care about them, had to leave behind in favor of healthier relationships. For me, that was Metroidvania and Gothic communism, a combination of different things versus me trying to simply fit in. I want to help people, and the only way to do that and develop communism is through universal liberation, i.e., while being neglected and catcalled by weird canonical nerds. When dealing with people like that, you speak out, but also live your best life. Speedrunning, you can keep it and your monopolies on it. I'm the mistress of my own field, and happy right where I am. But also, I'm here, I'm queer, and I'm not going anywhere. As promised, here is the original piece I wrote that started all this trouble, Postcolonialism and Doom, 2020. It wasn't as inflammatory as No Girls or Trans People Allowed, but it did start the process, one I eventually followed to its logical conclusion. Postcolonialism in Doom. Originally posted on Video Hookups, 2020-02-29. Often called Doom Guy by fans, the hero in Doom is a Marine, first and foremost. Demons have overrun the Martian lunar colony on Phobos, much in the same way the Xenomorphs swarmed Hadley's Hope in Aliens. In Doom 2016, the hero actually has a name, the Doom Slayer. Unlike the Doom Marine, the Slayer is essentialized, an ancient warrior dug out of the rock. Ellen Ripley was also a relic from the past, used to solve a colonial mess reoccurring in the present. Like Ripley, the Slayer unwillingly serves a powerful corporate employer, in his case the slippery Dr. Hayden, head of the UIC Corporation. Faced with an energy crisis the world had no answer for, Hayden has colonized Hell to harvest its energy. Who inhabits this unlucky fourth world? Demons, of course, monsters whose only purpose is to be slain. Of course, it's entirely possible to see the demons of 2016-2020 as an extension of their 1993 forebears. Heavy metal piñatas, smash them, have fun. However, it's hardly the sole interpretation, even if the makers intended otherwise. It's even possible for the player to see his enemies in-game as piñatas, but for this to reflect a parallel viewpoint held by him outside of the game. In this video, AGDQ, for example, the live streamer Bite Me pauses Doom 2016 to thank United States military members for their service. When I heard this, I found myself unable to view his words as neutral praise. An army has orders, after all. This remains true despite AGDQ being a charity fundraiser, where Doom is just another game being played to generate cash. Soldiers, or people who support them, still play Doom to revel in its slaughter and jingoistic camaraderie. It might pale against the reality of military service, but it still reflects that service through a video game made for a larger audience. Not all members of this audience are soldiers, but those who are can revel in the game for their own reasons. This includes the music. Doom was founded on a love for heavy metal, illustrated by Bobby Prince, taking influence from the likes of Slayer, Metallica, and Pantera. To say that heavy metal is simply meant to be enjoyed in Prince's singular manner is a bit absurd. Like the violence it sings about, music can be approached from multiple angles. To say otherwise ignores the reality of how music can be applied. The same goes for any form of media, from Pepe the Frog to Nordic runes. Doom is much more accessible and concrete in terms of what it reflects: military action. So is the external militaristic flavor that might insert itself into the game's conveniently Spartan power trip. Conversely, the game is something that can be enjoyed by people who aren't soldiers or hawks. I detest war and violence, but love demons, heavy metal, and video games focused on war. To consume them is not to say one enjoys war, the things about war, a bit different than saying you love soldiers and their service. Take Aliens, for example. The movie was an allegory for the Vietnam War. If this allegory is entertained, this would make the xenomorphs the Viet Cong. The xenomorphs resisted the colonial urges of Weyland-Yutani and their American flag-wearing colonial marines. The Viet Cong were a communist threat in the eyes of the CIA, whose doomed colonies were arguably a front for shadier practices. Yet the story in Aliens is less about the Marines being good and then simply doing their jobs. Ripley is the central character, and we're meant to root for her. The tendency to do so is perfectly fine. Ripley's struggles are separate from the company's. This being said, it's not unwise for the audience to question their knee-jerk response to what they see, Ripley laying waste to every xenomorph in sight, and to consider how such violent imagery is applied to real people in parallel situations. The Vietnam War happened, the people in it died, but you still have to tell the story to an American audience somehow. The same arguments apply to Doom. The Marine is not good at all, is simply a man doing his job in an insane situation. The story takes the form of a video game whose aim is ultimately to have fun. This means empowerment, despite colonialism often having the opposite effect. Bear in mind, the original story in Doom was incredibly basic, as were its levels. They were essentially kill rooms, boxes built for you and your foes, with barely enough detail to merit calling them anything else. With the advent of the Quake and Build engines, further information could be supplied, future levels starting to resemble actual places. Fast forward to Doom 2016, the game openly politicized its violence, its overarching plot beating energy crisis over the player's head. The metaphor was also a bit Promethean, this energy being stolen from another place, greater power. Doom 2016 was smaller in scope. It focused on the brutes, fodder, or army belonging to whoever owned this energy source to begin with. We never saw the mastermind behind the Trojan horse. Similar to Doom 2, Doom Eternal throws the player into a larger conflict, wherein the Earth becomes the target chosen by an ultimate threat. Totalitarian regimes invent this threat in order to justify the hero's violent actions. What is the Queen in Aliens save a rival monarch, one whose power infringes on Weyland's, including Ripley as the company's unwilling servant? Likewise, the villain in Doom Eternal, the Khan Maker, a not-so-subtle nod to Genghis Khan, in Mongolian, Khan means leader, is simply a power greater than the UAC corporation. The Khan is foreign, fantastical, and she uses her technology to trap humanity and lure them to their doom. With the company exposed as a tin regent, a true ruler must emerge, a disenchanted outsider from an older time where disputes are solved through violence. The Slayer. In Aliens or Doom, it's mutually assured destruction, the company and the natives being destroyed by an indifferent leveler. However, Doom Eternal does less to build on this premise than embellish on the universe that houses it. This lore is largely window dressing for the underlying metaphor of military conquest. Despite it being framed as good versus evil, the Slayer is an equal opportunity ass-kicker. Doom Eternal literally has him fighting demons, but also angels. Traditional symbols for good and evil are equalized through ultraviolence. Unlike older neutral characters like Ripley or Rambo, there's no one to rescue, just enemies to kill. This is another stab at neutrality. There's still room for politics, though, and certainly room for duality. Consider the Miltonian backdrop Doom Eternal establishes. Milton's Paradise Lost also featured a great war between angels and demons. This war remained a dissident allegory for the Church of England. Writing it was an act of demonstrable sedition. It's one thing to say that playing video games is or isn't political. It's quite another to say that video games can never be political because they're video games. If Byzantium's infamous chariot race riots between the blues and the greens were political, then video games can charge different social groups to congregate and interact in political ways too. It might not seem like it because of the modern world and how fragmented games are as a product to be sold versus how atomized and insulated people are as individuals. Regardless, messages can still be conveyed across different platforms to unite people of different political standings. However, even if video games were demonstrably neutral, neutrality is still a political stance. Just as the Slayer is part of a larger us versus them conflict, those controlling him in-game or out could potentially assign him to a particular group. This assignment not only becomes a form of ownership over the game by claiming its hero as being made for a particular faction, it also fails to wholly divorce itself from people in terms of how they behave in the real world. This includes real-world activities that parallel a video game's own content. The game becomes something to identify with, to claim. To those who play Doom Eternal might argue otherwise. It's just gamers killing demons, right? And it is gamers killing demons. The Slayer calls the Doom Fortress home, a lion's den in outer space stuffed with Doom paraphernalia, including a triple monitor gaming rig, none of which has gone unnoticed by gaming channels online. They love that shit. He's basically a jacked-up, digital version of the game's target audience, personifying an image of themselves resupplied in this game from older works. This may be a concept that applies to video game heroes in general, but it feels especially meta and overt with the Slayer, art referencing players referencing art. Perhaps it's better for those who benefit from Doom Eternal's gregarious qualities to avoid having it stamped as a military recruiting tool, a la America's Army Proving Grounds 2015, even if Doom Eternal wasn't strictly built as a recruiting tool. Its imagery can, at the very least, be adopted literally for this purpose. People with similar views can arguably flock to the same banner and say it belongs to them, not unlike a national flag. Already there's a sense of division, wherein someone like myself who enjoys Doom feels divided from its more warlike customers. I'm against war, so politically we're already on two opposing camps going in. Doom is still being marketed to a larger, heterogeneous group, the old-school shooter crowd. Not all shooters shoot things in real life. But when gamers openly support the military slaying demons around the globe, the door for postcolonialism gets thrown wider than the gates of hell. Is the sort of camaraderie Doom inspires always so bellicose? No, but the dualistic nature of what's being conveyed cannot be dispelled by saying it doesn't exist, either. And those of you who say, well, you just don't like Doom or heavy metal or demons, can just hush. I'm a gothicist by trade, and adore all of these things. It also means I can't ignore the liminality in media, or social exchanges orbiting media. It's entirely possible to enjoy the game and criticize it, because my criticisms are aimed at its potential for colonial misuse, rather than it being the only option. This could all be a joke to the developers selling their games to all groups within the shooter fanbase, regardless of politics. However, their joke is still informed by the masculine, warlike properties of 1980s Americana told through action movies, domestic heavy metal, and the occult. It's worth noting that Slayer was anti-war, exposing its horrors to their enthusiastically macabre music. Likewise, the shock of military overreach and inevitable failure is a running trope in colonial war narratives like Aliens, whose director, like George Lucas before him, is ultimately anti-authoritarian, not anti-war. They sold war to tell a message, because like a stockpile of weapons left behind, you can't simply get rid of these factors. They linger, as do the cultural attitudes tied to them as entertainment. All of this is relayed in future prestige, continuously reassembled and resold. Consider the design of weapons like the Star Wars blaster or the pulse rifles used by the colonial marines, all kit-bashed real-world weapons, some more well-known than others. Movies like these, or miniseries like The Mandalorian, display drama wherein the prime mover, center of attention, isn't simply the gunfighter, but his boomstick, a real-life antiquated firearm dressed up as science fiction. And what is Doom Eternal if not a present-day example of the lone gunman, a one-man army squaring off against the enemies of colonial Earth with a street sweeper? It's a blast to watch, but also illustrates another curious aspect, pandering to gun violence, not sex, though. Hugo Martin explained in a recent video how they removed the boobs from id Software's first female demon for marketing reasons. How American. Whatever the media, the selling of this violence is business, and always has been. It can be serious or funny. Doom and its many flavored sequels treat the love for violence as an entertaining part of the story, its raison d'être. It becomes an opiate of sorts, one whose drug euphoria parallels a fatal attraction towards the troubling aspects of humanity's colonial past, but also its present. That's what the Gothic is all about. There's no shame in loving these devices with an open mind. It becomes a problem when you overlook the destructive potential of what they stand for in the world at large, and how this factors into entertainment more generally. Il n'y a pas dehors text. There's no outside of the text. Derrida. Footnotes for those who walk away. This one, as in my review for Doom Returnal, really kicked the hornet's nest, and to this day remains my most infamous and divisive piece. The hate came from angry and vocal gamers essentially telling me that my love for Doom isn't legitimate, and that they'd defend the franchise from me, in short by attacking me as Doom Guy would demons from hell. Through keyboard war, white straight nerds really don't like Judith Butler. Apart from my contacts ghosting me, I had random strangers actively stalk me, tell me I was a faggot, and secretly gay for writing what I wrote and more. What doesn't kill you, and all that. 2. In regards to my disliking of the in-game readme to Iron Fury, which I wrote about in Neutral Politics, Feminism, the Gothic, and Zombie Police States in Iron Fury 2021, or as my partner calls it, Gaslight, Gatekeep, Girl Boss, the game. I guess we could read the readme here. This is from Iron Fury. The story so far. In the near future, the streets of Neo-DC are wrought with crime. You are Corporal Shelley Bombshell Harrison, leader of the GDF's Domestic Task Force, and the baddest bitch bringing it to augmented criminals that dare to defy the long-standing order of permanent martial law. You've earned your nickname through proficiency with explosives and kept it with your femme fatale looks. DC is your town, and you aren't going to let cracked-out cyber punks drag it any further down the drain without a fight. Though it has only been 6 months since you assumed the position, you're already the longest-serving head of the unit, a dubious honor, as all your predecessors were killed in the line of duty. As you fruitlessly attempt to get sloshed after another horrible day in urban hell, an explosion rings out, and your overpriced, watered-down drink becomes one with the ground. It's time to get furious. So yeah, pretty problematic. It's basically anticipating the rise of fascism in the United States, and the power fantasy parallels the canceled future as something to act out during a zombie apocalypse by stochastic terrorists. So yeah, that's gross. In regards to point number 3, single text, i.e. how speedrunning and spoilsport gaming attitudes normally contain tremendous invention that canonically restrict the development and execution of emergent puzzle solving to single text in gaming culture, i.e. gamer culture, which, as we've established in our thesis volume, is predominantly white, cishet, and male. Moreover, many metas exist within manufactured competition to serve the profit motive, e.g. fighting games and professional teams of the FGC as a globalized operation across multiple countries. If you don't compete, you don't exist. Footnote number 4, with organized speedrunning arguably having started in 1990. As Eric Koziel writes in Speedrunner Science, a long guide to short playthrough, 2019, in March of 1990, quote, Nintendo of America staged an event in Dallas, Texas, called the Nintendo World Championships. While this was mainly a marketing event to capture and further motivate the explosive success of the NES, it grew into a full-on circuit. While the event itself was built around total score, the Nintendo World Championships have a place in history as one of the earliest instances of organized speedrunning. Unquote. in regards to Caleb Hart being a piece of shit, e.g. Caleb Hart attacking the trans community in 2019. Quote, I don't have an issue with GDQ putting on this type of event, but I have issues with the attendance. If truly all the people attending were indeed females, great, but that won't be the case. Source tweet, Dagnall RTT, 2019. Him being racist, with an image here of him saying the N-word. Source, Big Jeffrey Speedrunner Caleb Hart, 42 banned from Twitch for saying racism, 2019. And pressuring a girl he got pregnant to have an abortion. Specifically, Caleb coerced a former sex partner, Barbie Edge, into having unprotected sex with him after saying, I'm not a rapist to her, then empirically gaslit her, and then had his parents coerce her into terminating her pregnancy. Source, Barbie Edge's 2020 tweet, sharing the link to her story about Caleb on Google Docs. This behavior is public record, and Caleb has never addressed it at all, let alone in any meaningful sense. Bigots are often sexual predators, and predators hate accountability for their actions. Barbie's tweet about it is still up on Twitter, as is her Google Docs testimony about his abuse. I was since banned from his Twitter, from his Twitch, for commenting during the Final Fantasy VII Remake speedrun that Tifa was being sex trafficked. Not for endorsing it, but for pointing it out. So yeah, Oates, people can change, but Caleb has never, because he's a grifter privileged by the system who exploits his audience for content. We'll get back to him when I release my final sex positivity book volume. In regards to Karl Jobst, Karl is a wonderful detective and an awful person, non-existent, activist, i.e. it's possible to be both and simply boils down to what he detects and why, i.e. In his case, he investigates frauds in the gaming community at large, and legitimately scummy people doing shitty things, but does so to run from and disguise his own shitty past and currently sexist, racist behaviors, i.e. he's a white moderate, which is really just a Nazi in disguise, re from the poetry module, quote, the boy gets girl formula is as old as the monomyth, which translates from D&D into video games via the usual imperial language of sex and force, from Donkey Kong, where the hero Jumpman is actually the villain, to Jump King, 2019, where it, and content, not criticism about it, e.g. Karl Jobst, Jump King's biggest barrier was finally broken, is suitably less ironic or critical of the media circuit it contributes towards. Instead, the developers in speedrunning symbiosis bank on the sexist headspace of Earthworm Jim or Dragon Slayer to valorize male action, i.e. to conquer hell is a place to enter, then oust dark kings or monstrous feminine beings to restore balance to the natural order of things by alienating and fetishizing nature as something to conquer by virtue of traditional male action, force under Cartesian thought. It's unironically something that wins the princess as a prize, who apparently is just lying in wait, dressed up like a bimbo, waiting to be taken back to the hero's bed to be lanced. There's nothing wrong with slutty outfits. There's everything wrong when female GNC agency is removed to choose outfits that cater to the male gaze, as classically white cishet to serve profit like usual, re. Persephone Van Waard's Borrowed Robes, The Role of Chosen Clothing, Part 1, Female Video Game Characters, 2019. This does nothing at a systemic level but engender class dormancy and betrayal from the usual breeding grounds for fascism, the middle class, but especially the male middle class, as having bought into the quest for mastery as literally the quickest straight-line path to sex by reducing nature to trad wife slut, the virgin and the whore, and biologically essential female. It's so gross. In-game, Jump King literally calls said prize smoking hot babe, ostensibly no different than Earthworm Jim's Princess What's-Her-Name, except it's worse because the princess this time around is actually a princess and not a cow in a princess suit. This canonical prostitution doesn't stay in text, but it reflects in how Karl Jobst, a man with former fascist ties, as well as being an honest-to-God pickup artist in the not-too-distant past, valorizes raw manly execution to get to the titular babe as fast as humanly possible. It's a game for straw dogs, investing so much energy at a hamster wheel that, in the same breath, is gentrifying the practice around heteronormative, monomythic gaming tropes. Simply put, It's regressive and capitalistic, not satire, because it does absolutely nothing to meaningfully challenge capital, all while actively reducing its target audience to rats in a race chasing the same old prizes, clones not just of Princess Toadstool, but Princess Peach, made extra effusive, sleazy, and demure, not unlike Arnold's Dream Girl in Total Recall, minus the satire, then making them king for a day. Like Total Recall, the director of that movie loves to critique American culture, but especially power fantasies. The procedure isn't just lobotomizing, but a gold rush, and people like Jobst, the ones selling the shovels, stand to make a lot of money for themselves. It's why the kids from Stranger Things both unironically treat Sadie Sink like a piece of meat and support Israel. It all connects because capital relies on dogma as something to internalize and serve profit on all registers, on and off stage, at home and abroad, by white male predators. In regards to Karl Jobst and his racist past, from r/speedrun, the drama starts in 2021 when a person known as Tomato Anus, we're off to a great start I see, severed ties with Karl through some company Karl kept, i.e. a neo-Nazi named R. White Goose. There's a lot of messages going back years regarding the server Goose was on, but those are from someone whose own testimony isn't the most reliable, a fash. Take a look at them if you want and decide for yourself what you think. Karl was friends with this person for years, frequented the server with other like-minded people. There's also Karl's explaining away of his own racist language. The following quote is from EMTech1 on Reddit. Quote, "The reason why I struggle to see Karl as a decent person is that some people would bring up their concerns afterwards, and Karl would outright lie about the N-word having any negative connotations in Australia. I'm Australian too, and this is absolutely not true. Karl is from Queensland, by the way, which is why that image references several places in that state that used to have or still have the N-word in it. The word has historically been used against our natives, and a 30-plus-year-old man, especially one who has an internet presence, would know better. Whatever you think about Goose, he has been very apologetic for the last 3 years, and I think he's made a genuine effort to move in a positive direction. I believe this to be a genuine change in character, and if it isn't, I'd rather accept someone faking being a changed person than turn my back on a genuine one. Karl, on the other hand, has never apologized, and instead lied about it. Even worse, once on Discord, he was ranting about people accusing him of being racist, and he brought up his Asian wife as his anti-racist shield. Do I need to mention that Derek Chauvin had an Asian wife? It's really beyond me that the community continues to ignore this guy's behavior. Edit. Here's some more receipts of him justifying using the N-word, bragging about sleeping with many women, his past to being a pickup artist, him bragging about his massive cock, and wanting breast implants for his wife. He named his son Maximus Wong. I seriously cannot think this is related to his penis eggplant obsession." Unquote. Apart from all of that, though, which honestly is bad enough, I think the pickup video is the biggest red flag because it's obviously Karl. Like, he made it, and it's garden variety sleazy in all the worst, most stereotypical ways. Combine that with its crusader veneer, and it doesn't take long for it to all fall apart. Fash disguises generally aren't very good. They just surround themselves with people as scummy as they are. I've seen the video, and honestly it tracks rather well with Karl's current streamlined and slightly sanitized but still sexist approach to games, i.e. he, for the pickup artist approach, treats women like games, as objectives, things to observe, learn, and manipulate in a mechanical, knee-jerk fashion that can then be conquered, and of course, he capitalizes on it as a free scheme for which the video in question advertises his own book based on beginner stuff, and having a stripper silhouette on the cover. Real classy dude. First one's free, in other words. I found it to be really odd, because he kept saying in the video, "Final step, get the hell out of there." And I'm like, dude, that's bad faith. But two, why break the ice if you're just gonna fuck off each and every time? That's conditioning bad habits. Maybe don't take dating advice from a white supremacist who spent his teenage years and 20s speedrunning GoldenEye. Dude unironically thinks he's James Bond or some shit. More to the point, a relationship isn't perfect isn't to perfect mechanical actions, routes like Jobst explains, thereby bouncing when things inevitably get rough, complicated. It's to be flexible with someone that you want to relate to on an interpersonal level as equals. Your partner isn't an adversary to conquer, but a peer to treat as human. So Karl's advice is actually terrible for dating reasons too, because that's not what it's about. For him, and all pickup artists, it's purely a head count to pile up and use to brag about with other white cishet guys. It's terribly cliche, but also cruel. Also, again, his son's name is apparently Maximus Wong. I can't verify that, but I've seen the Maximus shirt, so at least half of that is true. Like, what the fuck, dude? People like him make the world in their image, through genocide and vanity projects at the expense of nature as monstrous feminine. That's how white supremacists work, i.e. what Andrew Tate calls a genetic legacy, while in the same breath making an old sodomy argument that reduces sexuality to action. Having sex for reasons other than sexual reproduction is gay. The Cavernacles Andrew Tate and conservative men now say it is gay to like women, 2024. They think they're oh so slick, but really they're just gaming a system that's made for them to do so. So congratulations, Karl. You are playing life on easy mode. Last but not least, I thought we could watch the video with Karl doing his pickup stuff. Just because it's like, it's really him. And it's like, I'm not like making this up. Like, he actually is a pickup artist. And it's really strange, like, that nobody really mentions that. And admittedly, a huge part of his audience are probably kids in their teens, and he's not actively marketing that kind of thing anymore. But honest to God, hand on a Bible, it's really him. So let's give that a look.
Hey guys, it's Karl here. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate a simple and easy approach you can do if you're looking to overcome your fear of approaching women.
And I guess I could probably, I already give a commentary to it in my written account, so I don't want to talk about this too much, but it's obviously Karl Jobst. Looks like him, sounds like him. He's obviously a little bit younger than he is now. So I don't necessarily want to speculate on when this would have been made, but I would hazard to guess that it would have been in the early days of Twitch, maybe like in the 2010s. That's just a guess. It would definitely be before his YouTube channel, more than likely. Though again, I hadn't really been following his YouTube channel since before, I don't know, 2020. So yeah, definitely before he took off, and he was basically trying to make money doing this kind of thing. And he's serious about it too. He's not kidding. Approachhernow.com, because you only live once. And it's like, again, I don't have any problem with sex workers and high heels and not wearing any clothes. You can see a little bit of underwear here, I think. But in any event, well, actually, I'm not sure because her knees, I guess she's wearing boots. Yeah, these would be like thigh highs. But in any event, it doesn't matter. The point being is that this is like Andrew Tate type stuff. This is like the war room. It's like, are you tired of striking out? And the Matrix has you, Neo. Take the red pill. And so this is very MGTOW sexist kind of stuff, which, as we all know, has a increasingly conservative pipeline sort of approach to it. It's meant to funnel people into payment streams, and Karl Jobst can take your money. And newsflash, YouTube isn't really that different. Like, it's a form of content, and specifically a grifter content conservatives generally do, that they can exploit people for money. He's not trying to help you. He's trying to rob you. So the opposite of Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. And again, this is a real book. Download for free at approachhernow.com. Karl Jobst, Approach Her Now, How to Get Over Your Fear of Approaching Women. And of course, the women he has on his book cover are like Girls Gone Wild, wet t-shirt contest. Like, in what situation are you going to normally encounter girls like this? Like, if you're at a pool party or a wet t-shirt contest, quite literally, you might encounter women like this, especially who look like supermodels conventionally. Like, this looks like it was made with AI, but this would have been before AI was a thing. And so yeah, and I doubt that this is actually a real book, like in the sense of like he had hardcover copies of it, because that would be expensive. Again, it's a grifter with a website, and he probably has some starter videos very similar to Andrew Tate or Sneeko or anyone emulating that Ponzi scheme. As Karl Jobst was doing that, and admittedly, the content that he makes now is better. But this is where he started from, and this is something that he's never really acknowledged or talked about, to my knowledge, anyways. Could be wrong, but I've followed him since 2020, 2021, thereabouts, and I've never heard him mention this once. He'll talk about other people being shitty, like Billy Mitchell, who I remember him talking about Billy Mitchell when I was in grad school, actually. So in 2018, he never mentioned this kind of stuff. So this is older than that. And he talks about Billy Mitchell being a creep and a liar. And here's Karl Jobst being a creep. And lying by omission is a form of lying, especially when you're pointing the finger at other people and saying they do this, but not pointing that out about yourself. Like, it'd be one thing if he acknowledged that he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I totally used to do this and I'm penitent for my past sins. No, he's acting like he never did that at all. So he's a hypocrite. It's Darvo. He's using his excellent detective skills and punching at very low-hanging fruit, because Billy Mitchell is low-hanging fruit. Like, he's just a lightning rod for that kind of thing. Karl Jobst has milked him for years. And it isn't to say that Billy Mitchell isn't a bully. He's not a victim. He absolutely isn't a victim. But Karl Jobst is using Billy Mitchell's own shittiness to disguise his own. And it's like, you could be a detective and expose Billy Mitchell and not be a creep and friend to Nazis and an ex-pickup artist. For all I know, he's still a pickup artist. He just has like an alter ego or something. Can't verify that. That's just speculation. But there you go.
Alright guys, now I'm going to show you a few approaches, and then afterwards I'm going to break down exactly what happened. Let's go. Hey, sorry, I don't want to bother you guys. I just want to say I think you are really, really cute.
Oh, thank you.
Have a good night.
She's adorable, isn't she?
Yes, very adorable.
She's not cross.
Hey guys.
I will say that what he's doing is, like, if he wanted to demonstrate, like, all right, how to build confidence, and like, look, it is something that you're going to get told to do as far as pickup artistry goes. More broadly, there's some useful information in there. It's what they're doing with it that's more the problem. But you can walk up to women and tell them that they look really cute. And furthermore, you can practice that. Practice makes perfect. And as long as you're doing it to actually get comfortable with the end goal being to treat them like equals and not as heads to count or notches to put on your belt, then that's fine. But if you're doing it just so that you can exploit women, which is to say, use them for sex, and use your head count to then pitch all of your tactics to exploit young men on top of that, you're not just exploiting women in this case. The only reason that you're doing this is to use women as sex objects as a part of propaganda that you sell to vulnerable young men, then you're preying on everyone. And that's the problem. It's not just like, look, yeah, you can walk up to people and say, hey, you look beautiful. It's actually not a bad thing to do. if you want to get laid or to make friends. I mean, and it's not just about sex either. If you're talking with girls or whoever you're into, but just cishet girls, let's say you're a cishet guy and you're talking to cishet women or who you think are cishet women in any event. You say, hi, I think that you look really cute. Though I'll say that a girl's probably going to appreciate it more if you pick something specific about them. Don't just say they look cute, but say, hey, nice nails. Oh, your shirt kicks ass. Or I love your hair. Nice shoes. Girls love it when you notice that kind of thing because they put time and effort into that, not just because they're trying to attract a mate, though sometimes that is the case and it really depends, but also because they want to look a particular way. And they're doing it as much for themselves, but at the same time, they like being appreciated just for that. Not because someone wants to get into their pants, but because someone sees that and genuinely appreciates them for their appearance in a way that says something about the girl that the girl is proud about and wants to advertise. And if you can do that in a way where you actually care about the person, then it's no longer about trying to deceive them or just say what they want to hear so you can have sex with them. Girls aren't sex machines that you put kindness coins into until sex comes out. And that's actually something that Karl is teaching here. Oh, just say this and you can manipulate these girls like machines. And to a certain extent, you can take advantage of people with cheap flattery. You can walk up to them and be like, oh yeah, you look really pretty, really cute. And sometimes, depending on who you're talking to, the person could have low self-esteem and they could actually respond to that in a way that a sexual predator will take advantage of. They'll be like, oh, really? And a predator is absolutely going to pick up on that and take advantage. So there's also that as well. And I don't think that Karl Jobst talks about that here, but it's worth keeping in mind. Also, I don't think he has the consent of the people he's recording. Like, he might just have his camera pointed in their direction and it might be really obvious. But it's, again, he's not like letting these people know that he's recording them. Like before, during, or after this. He's just recording himself talking to these women without their consent. And to a certain extent, that kind of highlights the problem here is that, okay, like it's one thing if you're talking with people, you can't ask people for permission to talk to them before you talk to them. Like, obviously you could say, hi, can I talk to you? And because if someone's like giving off like serious fuck you vibes or don't talk to me vibes, then it's actually not a bad idea to ask for their permission to say, hey, do you have a moment? Or hi, you're trying to break the ice. That's totally valid. But in this case, like he's doing a series of experiments where he's not letting the people know that he's involving them in his experiments, which is kind of unethical, really. It's like, I get it, you want to test these things in the wild, and there is a certain spontaneity to that, but at the end, afterwards, he should absolutely let them know, hey, this is just so you know, what I just said and everything was for something. That would be the ethical thing to do. Like, it's not going to hurt his data if he does that, but he doesn't do that, to my knowledge. He doesn't do it in the recording anyways.
I don't mean to bother you. I just want to say I think you are really, really cute.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Okay, and they're like, okay, who's this guy? Thanks. Like, so these women were clearly uncomfortable. Also, is it just me, or does he walk like an asshole?
Hey guys,
Hi.
I don't mean to bother you. I'm just going to say that I think you're really, really cute.
Oh, thank you.
That's all right. Have a good night.
So yeah, this is a very like Charles Darwin, animals have mechanisms, push the button, see how they respond, and it's just, again, very much treating women like machines. And again, there's always a kernel of truth with this kind of thing, wherein, yeah, you can gauge someone and whether or not they're available or what signals they're putting out, or if they're dressed a particular way and they look kind of sexy. Yeah, they might not mind being told that they look sexy, because they're gonna be like, well, yeah, obviously I look sexy. I'm dressed like this. But that's not always the case, and but even so, it is important to acknowledge that, yeah, there is a certain practical function in what he's doing, but the context is just wrong.
Hey guys.
Also, another thing real quick here is he has his camera here, but then he's wearing a mic. So he's not just recording them with a camera without their consent, but he's also wearing a wire, so this is like an interrogation technique, and they don't know that.
Guys, sorry to interrupt you guys. I don't want to bother you. I just want to say I thought you were really, really cute.
I like how they can't hear him because, it's a crowded street. It's kind of noisy. So he has to be like, hi, just want you to know that you're really cute. Like, it'd be one thing, if you can, like, get someone's attention and they're like, oh, and then you're like, hey, and just, like, he'll, like, tap them on that, like, the arm or the shoulder or something like that. That's kind of weird. It's like, just be cool about it, dude. It's like, hey, nice shirt. You don't have to say, by the way, I wanted to get your attention before I tell you the thing. You can just, if you're going to say something to someone, say it. It's like, nice shoes. Just lead off with that. And if that's the first thing they hear, they're going to love that, and, because if someone walks up to you, at least in my experience, because I have, survivor's trauma, if someone walks up to me and it's like, hi, I don't mean to startle you, but I wanted to say something. And that's going to make me nervous. Like, I'm like, okay, what are you going to say? And, so I don't even think his technique is really that good, just in terms of how he's going about it. It's like, no, you don't want to build confidence by adding this unnecessary step that you're going to phase out of the equation later. Instead, what you want to do is just do it the way that you actually would do it. So if you see someone who's cute, just be like, again, see something about, like, how are they cute, and don't walk up to them and be like, hi, I think you're really cute. That's going to make most people uncomfortable. But if you noticed something about them, then you're actually describing something about them before saying, hi, I think you're cute, and now we're negotiating for sex, as opposed to, hi, I love your shirt, or your shoes are to die for. Something like that. It doesn't matter. When I was in grad school and I noticed that my ex had piercings, like a nose piercing, and I said, your piercing is really cool. And they're like, oh, thank you. And then at this point, we were already basically in bed at this point, but I was like, do you have any other piercings? And they're like, yeah, I have 2 pierced nipples. And I was like, oh, can I see them? You see how that's very different than, hi, I want to say something to you. And it's like, instead, I'm just like, I just looked at them, and to break the ice, I was like, your piercing's cool. And it works with tattoos. It works with anything physical. And that's partly why people wear that, because it gives you the opportunity to notice something about them. And then when you say that, I mean, obviously, they're going to know that you're possibly attracted to them. It's like a girl in a man's world. Of course, that's what she's thinking. But it's how you lead off with it that counts. And if you actually notice the thing, like, oh, somebody actually noticed my hair or something else that I put work into, it's going to make them feel appreciated. And the idea is that you want to do that in good faith. And in his case, he's not even trying. He's literally just saying, hi, I think you're cute. That's it. No shit. Like, they know that right off the bat. But did you notice what they were wearing? Did you notice how they smelled? No, usually, I don't know. I think if you get close enough to smell someone, and where they're, because normally people will wear perfume specifically for someone. But visually you can notice someone far away. So perhaps don't lead off with, "Hi, you smell really good," because that kind of implies that you're like getting close enough to smell them and then smelling them. Like, that's a very intimate thing. But the visual stuff is good. Or if they're playing an instrument, be like, "Man, you fucking rock, dude!" Like in Wayne's World, "You guys wail," So something like that can obviously work too. He doesn't walk up to Michael Myers' character doesn't walk up to the character that he's hitting on and says, "Hi, I really like you." He actually makes an effort to learn her language and also notice that she's at a show. And, he's obviously very attracted to her, but he doesn't just say, "Hi, I like you," and then say, "Oh, okay." And that's it. It's like, no, he actually treats her like a person. He relates to her like a person, not an object or a piece on a board.
She is the most beautiful person I've ever seen, so I
agreed. Thank you. See you guys.
It almost looked like there was someone else holding the camera. Yeah, okay, so so someone else was helping him record this. So he wasn't even doing this by himself.
Hey, guys, don't want to bother you. Just want to say I think you are really, really cute. Have a good night.
You're like, "Oh, thank you." So that kind of thing, it's always a dice roll, let fate decide. And sometimes people are going to respond really, really effusively. And, to what degree they actually feel about it, it's like these kinds of interactions, there is a usefulness in practicing these kinds of things. Just asking people what time it is. "Hi, I'm sorry, I lost my watch. Do you know what time it is?" And it's like, is there an element of performativeness to it? Yes. Are you doing that to practice talking to people? Yes. But it doesn't necessarily make you disingenuous if you're doing it to get better at talking to people. But if you're just doing it to take advantage of people, that's when it's a problem.
Hey guys. Sorry, I don't want to bother you. I just want to say you are really, really sexy.
Sorry?
I just want to say you are really, really sexy. That's all right. Have a good night.
I like how it's just like a hit and run too. He's like, "Yeah, you're really sexy. Okay, see you later. Get out of there."
Hey, excuse me, guys. Sorry to bother you. I just wanted to say.
And in this case, it's like, okay, he's standing with his friend who's holding the phone, kind of an upward angle, almost like an upskirt kind of shot. And I think she even notices that the person holding the camera is pointing it at them, So he's not even like being subtle in this particular instance.
Hey, I think you are really, really cute.
Like, she obviously responds well, but she looks kind of scared, actually, And the reality of being a woman in a man's world is, you can dress like this. And on one hand, you want to be noticed, who doesn't want to be desired, but it's that gothic heroine kind of thing where you're in a castle with the scary, scary bad guy. And obviously, if you're reading a novel or something like that, there's an element of calculated risk, of control. You can't actually get hurt. But if you're out in the real world doing this kind of thing, trolling for sex or attention or whatever, there's always an element of danger. And she actually looked kind of nervous. She seems happier about it.
Have a good night.
And she's laughing kind of nervously, like, "Oh, okay, he's not a psycho. He's not going to kill us." And he's dressed in leather with a skull on his shirt or whatever, so it's like, you don't know, especially nowadays.
That's right. Hey guys.
Also, real quick, I want to say too that the particular environment that he's at, like, he's on a busy sort of intersection, and there's a lot of kebab and fish and chips kind of places. And this reminds me of when I was in Manchester, England, and it was a college portion of the city right at Manchester Metropolitan University, and they had just kebab shops all over the place, hamburger joints, places where young college students would go and congregate, hang out, whatever, because a lot of times, it's just like in between classes, you just got off work, whatever. So he's going to a place, where there will be people present, and it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. If you want to catch a fish, you go where the fish are. So like that is, again, you don't want to treat them ideally just like a goal, like you want to treat them like people. But that is a technique. It's kind of an old-fashioned technique, like, going to a bar or going to a physical location. Personally, I prefer to date online. It's a lot safer. But my point in mentioning it here is that he's picking very deliberate places to do a predatory kind of behavior. Pickup artists don't go to like a library or something usually. I mean, I'm sure maybe they do if they want a challenge, but you can't talk in libraries. The librarians can be like, shh. But he's going to a large, crowded, busy place where there's lots of young women around. So this is very, very much something that he did. He was casing an environment before operating inside it. Which again is a predatory thing to do.
Don't mean to bother you. Just want to say that I think she's really, really cute. That's all right. Have a good night. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt whatever you're doing there. I just wanted to say you are really, really cute. That's all right. Have a good night. That's all right. Have a good night.
Thanks.
See ya.
I like how it sounded like in that particular case, they wanted to keep talking with him, and he's like, no, I'm leaving now. And then he walks away, and it's like, so this is bad faith because he never had any intention to have a conversation. And if you're practicing and all you're trying to do is just get over, like your nerves are so bad that you're just doing that to practice, like, okay, maybe at first, but what are you going to do once you find someone that you actually like who's interested? It's actually a bad habit to say, you know what, no, I don't actually want to talk to you. Well, if that's the case, then why are you doing this at all?
All right, so you just saw me do a few approaches. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened.
Okay, this isn't a skull. This is like an underwear model, unrestrained, and she's this is like a pretty shallow looking t-shirt. So imagine this guy walks up to you, looks kind of like a vampire. He looks, what he looks like? He looks like Keith Sutherland from the Lost Boys. And again, there's nothing wrong with that into and of itself, but he's obviously recording with a friend, and who knows, maybe at this point he's done this a lot and people are like, yeah, that's Karl, and he's just ignore him. But like he's walking up to people wearing this kind of stuff literally on his sleeve. It's like if someone walk up to you, like, I mean, he looks like a walking frat boy kind of thing, and it's just like a bit cringe. And now, okay, he has the trophy wife and the white picket fence, and he doesn't do that kind of thing anymore, but he used to. And honestly, you don't have to go very far into go onto his Discord server to see how he talks. Like in the footnote that I was describing different examples where he's like, I'm not like that. Like, I was never like that. It's like, no, dude, you were, and not that long ago. Maybe 10 years ago at the latest. It's like, no, it's like he really was this kind of person. Like, he's not faking this. Like, he's actually doing this to sell it to people.
Now, so let's break it down into 4 simple parts. Step number 1, you're going to do something that's called an opening buffer. Now, this is something that basically makes the approach less intense.
Now, like, this is the speedrunning kind of thing, right? This is his speedrunning strats to get into a girl's underwear, basically. And it's like, okay, that's fucking weird. Like, obviously there's a technique to meeting people and stuff like that, but you don't have to get it down to a science. It's an art form. Like, you just have to make someone feel comfortable and safe around you. Like, okay, this person isn't going to murder me or rape me. That's a good start. And if you can make them like you and trust you, just because you're a genuine, nice person, while also protecting yourself, because you can run into predators and stuff like that. In my case, that's what happened. that's all you have to do. It's like women aren't video games, but this is literally what he's doing, where there's like, okay, there's steps 1 through 4, and it's like, that's fine up to a point. But again, he's selling this to men, being like, all right, doctors hate this one simple trick. And if you do these 4 things, bam, girl's panties gonna fly off into the stratosphere. She's gonna be so wet. And it's like, no, that's generally speaking, there's a kernel of truth to that, wherein if you get a girl to like you, yeah, she's gonna get excited probably and perhaps want to have sex with you. But the way that he's treating them like it's this, like they're video games, that is not how women generally operate. Yes, there are some sluts. But in that instance, guess what? You don't need a technique. If they're a slut and they like you, guess what? It's easy, But if they're a normal person who perhaps takes a little bit more effort than just walking up to them and fanning your eyelashes or not even saying anything, no, they're not video games. And this kind of thing, it's like, yeah, up to a point you can do things like this to manipulate people. You can manipulate and control people, but is it the right thing to do? Is it how you want to learn how to have relationships? I wouldn't want to have that kind of approach. And I'm someone who's had plenty of relationships. In terms of physically, I've been with 8 people, and online I've been, well into the double digits. And as far as that goes, beyond walking up to people and communicating your boundaries and making sure that excuse me. Sorry. Making sure that they feel comfortable and safe. That's all that you have to do. You don't have to have like this long, you don't want to have this long plan anyways. Everyone has a plan until they get hit, right? And obviously that's boxing, but you don't want to have this long, complicated plan. You want to be loose and kind of flexible with it. People aren't games. And the problem with speedrunners is there's a lot of memorization involved, and it's very mechanical, and you normalize things to control for the outcome that you want. That's not how people work, generally speaking. Beyond, well, be nice to them. Don't tell them what they want to hear. Relationships are built on honesty, but let's face it, when you're first getting to know someone, it doesn't hurt to be nice. It doesn't hurt to be charming. And, you also want to find out if you have chemistry or not. So chances are you're going to have sex right away to find out. But, as you get to know each other more, this kind of information that he's teaching you is useless. Again, it's beyond surface level. Like it's the most superficial approach to dating that you can possibly do. And it's just, he's setting young men up to fail, not to actually bond with people.
Initially. So, for example, you come up and say, hey guys, sorry, I don't mean to bother you, but. Or, hey guys, I don't mean to sound weird, but. So
it's weird too because he says, hey guys, and it makes me picture him in his videos, like, hi you guys, you absolute legends, and it's the same kind of thing. It's like he just changed the topic, but his delivery is exactly the same. It feels very strange.
Basically makes the situation less intense for you and also for the woman as well. Now, step 2, you're going to give her the compliment. So personally, I like to say, hey, I think you're really cute.
Bad advice. Don't lead off with that. It's not specific. It shows your intent, but not that you're actually paying any attention to them. It's not a good technique.
But you can really do whatever you want. It doesn't really make a difference either.
It does make a difference, actually. 1, you want to do what you're comfortable with. 2, you want to do something that's not going to make the other person uncomfortable. And you want to be genuine about it. So it actually does make a difference. He's saying you could just light a flare and wave it in their face. It's like, no, it does make a difference in terms of how you get someone's attention.
Either way, just pick something though that, is true. Don't lie and say something just for the hell of it.
That's good advice. But here's the thing, right? In his case, he's not following his own advice because he's literally walking up to random people and saying, hi, I think you look sexy. I think you look beautiful. Now, chances are there are instances where he says, I think that she looks attractive. And he is picking certain women. So perhaps he's not being completely disingenuous. But there's also, again, a problem where he sees them as like any hole is a goal, and he thinks that they're attractive and sexy. He's being kind of shallow and sleazy. But so I guess he's not lying, but he's also, again, being pretty shallow about it. Like he's not saying, hi, I think I like this about you, or he's literally just saying, hi, I think you're sexy. Translation, I want to have sex with you, which is probably true. But it's kind of telling to how he views women. It's like he approaches women who look like the woman on his shirt. And he views that as confidence, and in a certain sense it is. Like he's that smug asshole he's the bad boy, at least he thinks he is, that you go to the bar and you have a one-night stand with. And that works up to a point, but you're never going to have any kind of serious relationship with someone. Now, could be wrong, and that could be how he met his wife, but I don't know anything about his wife. I mean, his wife could be a pickup artist too, and it's a match made in hell, and they're both pickup artists. But I would bet money that that's either he met her that way and she knows exactly what he is and she's okay with it, but chances are there was something else that went into it, like such as, okay, she was attracted to him for various reasons, such as, oh, hey, this guy is successful, if they met through work or something like that. That's not what's going on in this video, is my point. There was undoubtedly something else that happened, and he didn't have his camera bro pointing the camera at this person, and maybe he did, and if that's the case, it's like super fucked up. But I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and think that his wife wasn't that kind of mark, at least I hope not.
If you see something you like in a woman, just go up and say exactly what you think. Now, step 3 is really important, but it's really subtle. So you're just going to say the compliment, and then you're going to observe her behavior for about 1 to 2 seconds. So you say the compliment, then you just look at her.
That's weird. Like on one hand, yeah, you want to like be with the person that you're talking to, and when you are talking with someone, you want to see how they're responding. That's fine. But again, if you're setting it up, yes, I gave the compliment and now I'm waiting to see what she says. And like that kind of thing is like, okay, well, don't you do that with everyone? Like, why does it have to be like this thing? Like, obviously, if people are socially awkward, that kind of thing, not everyone's good about making eye contact. You might put your hands in your pockets and stare at your feet kind of thing. But it doesn't change the fact that it's like, it makes me think like, you're like, okay, I did this and now I'm waiting for them. Okay. And if they don't do this, then I'm going to run away. Like, I don't know. It seems like a very opportunistic way of approaching things. It's very mechanical. It's like, no, don't, it's also not something that's going to work past the initial sort of phrase. Obviously you want to sort of monitor things and see how things are going. Okay, she's obviously into me, or she's obviously not into me, like that kind of thing. But you don't have to just sit there and wait. It's like, because ideally, you're not just walking up to them to push their button. It's like, like you can be like, hey, it might be someone from class or something like that. You might have more to say than just like, hi, and then you wait for them to do their thing. It's like, you might be like, hey, I loved your talk in class or something like that. Like, obviously, in that case, you're not dealing with random strangers. But that's another thing, is his video here is recommending advice where you're talking to complete strangers. You don't know them. at all. Like from class, from work, never date people at work, or class. But you know what I mean? Like, it might be like a friend of a roommate or something. It's like it is possible to date someone that you know. Like, you don't have to just literally walk up to random strangers on the street. And it almost sounds like the people that he's giving advice to, which is perfectly fine, probably don't have a lot of friends and are socially awkward. That's totally okay. But again, he's not, he's basically like encouraging you to just walk up to strangers and approach them in a very mechanical kind of way. And it's like, okay, well, don't just walk up to them and be like, okay, I'll say something and then wait for them to respond. It's like, why are you walking up to them? It's like, do you actually like them? And he's not mentioning any of that at all.
Do nothing for about 1 to 2 seconds and basically take in her response and see what she does. Now, the last step is probably the most important, which is leave. So you've...
And that one really doesn't make sense. Like, it's like, no, don't leave. It's like, if you're talking with someone, you have their attention, and they what if they like you? And they're like, actually, I have to go now. So you literally walk up to them, say something, wait for them to respond, and then turn right back around and walk away. She's going to think that you're weird. Don't do that. This is terrible, terrible advice. Like, up until this point, like, it was already kind of sketch from the start, but this is perhaps the worst step of all. This is not, no, it's like, all right, if you actually, like, what if, get her number first, at least in the old days, that's what they used to do. I got her number. What do you think of them apples? And so it's like, yeah, if you're going to put forth the energy and effort to talk to someone, especially if it takes energy because you might be socially introverted, you might have a smaller social battery, that kind of thing, then this is terrible advice. You don't have as much energy. You don't have as many spoons to expend toward these kinds of things. So you don't want to just walk up to people in this very mechanical way. You want to be organic. You want to be fluid. You want to be able to anticipate certain things. You want to be able to stick around if things start going in a good direction. And just like hyperbolically, someone could be like, ooh, I like you. And the first thing that she says in response to is, want to go to bed? Want to come upstairs with me? Let's have sex. Are you really going to follow Karl Jobst's advice and be like, actually, Karl Jobst told me to turn around and run away? No. So it's like, that's obviously kind of a radical example. I've had things kind of like that happen before. Not quite that quickly. That kind of thing generally happens more if you're at a club, if you're in a bar. But notice how he's not in a club or a bar. He's in a situation that's like in between a club or a bar. It's a liminal space. And he's hunting.
You've said the compliment, you've observed her response. Now you're just looking to get the hell out of there. No matter what happens, you're going to leave no matter what. So you can just say, hey guys.
Leave no matter what. So if she just started ripping off her clothes and being like, take me, you fool. And you're like, oh, nope, sorry, I gotta leave. It's like, no, come on, Karl.
Have a good night or have a good day. I hope you, enjoy yourself, whatever you want, and just leave. Now, there are a few important points I want to mention, though. Number one, this is really a beginner's approach, so it's not meant for advanced people who really know.
It's not meant for advanced people. It's just a beginner's approach kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, but again, girls aren't like something that, oh, it's a level 10 girl. Oh, that's a Stacy. Don't mess with them. They're too high level. You have to level up your character first before you're skilled enough and you have the remove panties spell. Like, it's not how it works. It's like you can have sex with someone or just a relationship more broadly. I mean, there are plenty of times where I was in a situation where I'm like, oh my God, is this really happening? I can't believe it. And I didn't know what the fuck was happening. It's like I had an idea, but I didn't have like some master plan where I'm like, okay, I do this step and then this step and then I skip this step, but then I do this step backwards, and it's like, no, it's like, no. And so it's like, obviously with this kind of thing, if it's just to help people overcome their fear and anxiety, and they're like, I don't know, pathologically anxious, then maybe something like this, it's pretty common advice, but then why are you paying him money for it? Like, this is literally commonplace knowledge. There's nothing special about this information at all. It doesn't make him an expert. You're not going to speed run your way into getting that sweet, sweet punani. And trust me, it doesn't work like that. It either happens or it doesn't. Someone likes you or they don't. And that's just it. It's like, obviously there's the Bildungsroman like Anne of Green Gables or Jane Eyre or something like that. Read or I Married Him. And there's a whole giant fucking character arc leading up to that. And then they have sex after the story is over. And it's like, no, it's, at least in my experience, it's like, okay, the longest I think I had before sex started happening for me was like 2 weeks or something like that, because I was into someone and they're like, hold on, I have to break up with my boyfriend first. So she did. I had to wait a week, and then we had sex after that. And okay, that's fine. But when I was in grad school and I slept with the person I was with then, no, it's like, I mean, to be fair, we were living right next to each other and we were both overseas students, and we were looking for company, so those are unusual circumstances. Do not go to grad school to try and get laid, even though that's what I did. I went to school to try and find love because I'm a nerd, and I thought, okay, why not do that? And holy shit, it worked. But don't do it, because there's a very good chance that it wouldn't have worked, and I still would have been overseas. The odds of something like that happening are very small. But all of the relationships I've had are completely random in terms of, will someone like me or not? Well, there's no way to know. So you can't approach it like this. This is doomed to fail from the start. Don't do it.
What they're doing, this is simply for guys who just want to overcome their fear and they're having trouble getting stuff done.
Getting stuff done. I wonder what he's talking about.
Our second point is, I don't really prefer this environment, so I don't really think it's a good idea to stop people when they're walking.
Then why are you doing it? It's like, no, if you prefer it a particular way, then do it the way that you'll do it. It's like, it's like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to do something. And like, obviously, like there's a beginner technique. And if you're teaching someone Chopin, but you actually prefer Rachmaninoff, like, I get that. But it just seems kind of strange. Also, don't bury the lead. Let people know the intent of your video at the start. Don't wait until the video is over to explain to them what's going on. Like, I get it. This is like, I have the secret knowledge, the gnosis, and then I'm going to show you what it is, and now I'll tell you. Like, he's keeping people in suspense. It's very deliberate. But it's like, no, in terms of like a thesis, let people know up front what you're doing.
I much prefer, going to a club or a bar inside and talking to people when they're already stopped, so they're already sitting down, or they're just standing around, they're not really moving. I think that's a much better place to do it. The only reason I'm out here is because it's not so noisy, so you can hear what I'm saying.
Well, also, if you were recording someone while sitting down next to them, you'd have to let them know. Like, in this kind of hit and run sort of approach, it's easier for him to record someone and be like, oh, hey, and they might not necessarily be aware of what's going on. But in certain cases, like they were, and like that's a problem, because if someone's like, who's your camera buddy? They're going to think that they're on TV, or it's like for a blog or a webcast or something like that, which again, it's like, no, it's like with this kind of thing, he really, if you record it and observe it, it can actually throw off the kinds of results that you want. If I was trying in any of my relationships to succeed, just even sexually, for instance, and I have a camera guy standing next to me, and they're like, who's that? And they're like, don't worry about it. It reminds me of Dennis from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Put the tape over the red dot, and they're like, what's that? Oh, don't worry, it's a camera. they're like, oh, and they're like, no, it's turned off, see? But then you put the tape over the light. That's what Karl kind of reminds me of here, and that's not a good thing.
And the third point is be consistent with it. So, 10 to 20 per night, once or twice a week, and you might have to do that for, a couple of
Girls aren't push-ups.
months before you really start.
A couple of months? Like, no, it's like just you're going to have much better luck relating to people if you spend more time with one person talking with them. Like, you don't do like 20 or 30 people a couple times a week. So twice a week, 8 times a month. And that's 8 times 20, 160 people. Like, there might not be that many people where you are, if you're just, you might, get repeats or something. It's like, where are you going to find that many people? And you're just standing around like being like, okay, each time I'm just going to walk up to a different person. You're going to run out of people after a while. Again, it doesn't really make any sense. And like, obviously if it's like EverQuest and it's like, oh, I'm passing through this giant open area and I'm encountering a random mob or something that I'll never see again, then I guess, okay, fine, whatever, but then it's just bird watching at that point and you're not actually trying to get to know the person. And you shouldn't approach a relationship like that unless you're just trying to have one night stands, then whatever. Go to a bar, like do what Karl does then. But again, that's why it's important to tell people what's the point of this up front. Who's your target audience? Okay, because the advice that he's giving is for pickup artists, or people who want to pick up people. But again, it's like, what if you want like an actual relationship? And obviously, in his case, he's talking about sex and stuff like that. But then he's the weird, creepy guy who's walking up to women with literally like, "I want to fuck you" on his T-shirt, and it's like there's confidence, and then there's just like being like arrogantly transparent to the point that it's insulting, which is how people like Karl operate, or at least how he used to operate. Now he's like sort of whitewashed himself. He's like, oh, I'm the white moderate with the white picket fence. But here, that's not how he's working.
Hard to notice the difference, but trust me, it is going to happen. What we're trying to do is decondition the brain for that fear response. So,
and there is a certain kind of like a vasovagal kind of thing. If you have trauma, in particular, I was abused when I was younger, and I still struggle with the fawning mechanism. But like obviously, that kind of thing isn't something that you necessarily have to condition out of you ahead of time, because if you're in a relationship with someone, you're going to get triggered eventually, trust me. And if that happens, you need to be able to tell the person, hi, I'm triggered. You don't run away as soon as that happens. It's like you can't just uncondition trauma, which is why I think someone like him just, I don't know about his personal life. I don't know what happened to him when he's younger. Maybe he doesn't have any trauma at all. But the way that he's making it sound is it's just like a gut reaction, like what they call like hesitation wounds, where he's like, oh, you're about to strike. Oh, I'm hesitating. That's more what it sounds like to him. It's like you're hesitating to make your move because you're anxious about predating on someone as opposed to you have trauma. And he's not making that distinction either, which is actually kind of important. And again, it's like, what kind of, he's calling it fear, but what kind of fear? Why are you afraid? That's something you need to understand.
Currently, whenever we think about approaching a woman, we get the fear. By doing this exercise, it's going to undo that conditioning. It's going to rewire the brain.
He also calls it conditioning, wherein something has happened to make you uncomfortable. But that might not be the case. A lot of times people are just anxious, period. And it's not something where you've been conditioned a particular way, as in you've been told over and over repeatedly that you shouldn't do that. So I think it's kind of a mistake to frame it like that. Unless, now, if you're in an abusive situation like my stepfather, who was overbearing and telling me what to do and what not to do, kind of like Karl here. But again, there's a lot of presumptions about the people that you're talking to, but also Karl's audience too.
So that over time, whenever we think about approaching women, we're not going to be so anxious. Okay guys, so let's recap. Step number 1, go in with a buffer. Step number 2, give her a compliment. Step number 3, observe how she responds. And step number 4, get out of there and leave. Pretty simple. Good luck guys. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Let me know how this goes. And also always remember the most important thing if you're looking to get over your approach anxiety. Subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be giving you a shitload of free good advice. Catch you later guys.
Okay, and that's the video, right? Free good advice, but also go to his free website where, you know, he's trying to make money off this. This isn't, first one's free, basically. And again, I don't know, like this kind of thing, pickup artists historically are conservative. Karl Jobst, given his history and the kinds of company that he keeps, this isn't really a good look, and just his politics more broadly. I don't know, I just can't help but feel like, hi, I'm Karl Jobst, and I'm saying this thing because I want to get a response out of you, and now I'm observing you because I'm predatory. That's what it feels like, and not just with the pickup artist kind of stuff, but you'll notice that in his YouTube videos where he'll talk about, like, hi, you legends, I'm gonna fluff your ego, and now go and buy this product from my sponsor and subscribe to my channel. You know, there's a certain there's a bit of a overlap in terms of what he's doing when he's operating. It's like he's a used car salesman or something like that, except he's, instead of peddling sex, he's peddling speedruns now. And but he still talks about sex sometimes, depending on who his sponsor is. Like Manscaped, he'll talk about his balls and sex organs and stuff like that, which, fine, whatever. If you're trying to advertise clippers for your junk, then you're gonna kind of have to, like, but in any event, so yeah, this is Karl Jobst, and this is the kind of people that I had to deal with. People like Karl are the kinds of people that I was interviewing, and not just interviewing, but also just dealing with, who would like walk up to me and say all this awful shit, and a lot of it was anonymous, and a lot of it was bigoted, and a lot of it had to do with speedrunning in particular. And Karl is someone whose entire career operates around speedrunning, and it's entirely possible for people to be speedrunners and not to be sex pests like Karl. But that being said, there's a larger sort of cultural element, and that's just something I kind of wanted to look at in terms of talking about the video and giving you an example that's a little bit more off the cuff. Most of this was obviously like one big long script. A lot of it, you know, is based off old research and stuff like that. And incidentally, my new books, I have 2 more books coming out, one on Valentine's Day, and then after that is my 3rd and final volume. And that book contains a lot of this kind of stuff, where I talk about Caleb Hart, I talk about Ian Kaczynski and similar people, and break it down in a written form, mind you. But there's a lot of like journalism and activism vis-a-vis speedrunners and people that I critique in a way that you don't really see in my other books. So because that's something that I did like in 2023 early on when I was going through my book series initially, and then I'm like, okay, well, now I got to work on theory and stuff like that, and I kind of moved away from that. So in any event, yeah, that's just a taste of things to come. I hope that you find the overall article interesting. This is something that I've wanted to talk about for a long time, and it just never really got around to it. And I just finished writing a big piece about Frankenstein, and I had some time off just in between the next big chunk of proofreading that I have to do for the current manuscript that I'm working on. So I thought I would talk about this finally. You know, this is something that gave me a lot of grief back in 2020, 2021, thereabouts. Even earlier than that, like 2019. And so being able to make a video about this, to talk about the entire history, but also to talk about like Caleb Hart or Karl Jobst, because people don't talk about it nearly enough because they see these people as opportunities to make money. And the same way that you might not critique a celebrity or an authority figure, a coach or a police officer. It doesn't matter. And it's like, no, we have to hold people like this accountable, especially in speedrunning, which is very gentrified, very white and male and predatory, because someone like Karl Jobst is in the hen house and constantly advertising to people, don't worry, I'm totally not like Billy Mitchell. And it's like, no, you're not, because you are actually a competent speedrunner. You're a competent gamer, but you're also a sex pest. And that merits critique, especially because you try and hide it. So, yeah, that's just a taste of things to come. I hope you liked it. I hope you liked the article. This is the 5th episode in my Metroidvania YouTube series thing. Next time we're going to read a section from my corpus. It's actually divided up into 2 big sections. So we're going to read the first half of that and then the second half, and that'll make up the next 2 episodes. And then after that, I'm not really sure if I'll have too many more immediate episodes, just because I do have a certain amount of proofreading I have to get done. So I can't afford to take too much time off to do stuff like this. And furthermore, I don't really have too much more stuff like this to write about off the top of my head. So ideas for episodes after that, I'll kind of be depending on audience members, or after my book series is done, I might think of some Metroidvania to talk about or something like that. I'll definitely be trying to think of things, but if you have any suggestions, let me know what they are. In any event, I'm going to cut the video short there. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, like, share, and subscribe. Leave feedback. I'm always happy to respond to criticism, negative or positive, admittedly, but I prefer something constructive, not that haters are going to hate, but if you have something nice to say, I like that too. So in any event, thanks for watching and take care.